Have you ever wondered why some people, people you love, people you admire, keep going back to the very thing that's tearing them apart? From the outside, addiction looks like weakness. They say, he just needs more discipline. She should know better. Why can't they just stop? But what if we've been asking the wrong questions all along? What if addiction isn't about the substance, but about the soul crying out for something it can't name? Carl Jung, one of the great minds of modern psychology, didn't see addiction as a disease in the way we talk about it today. He saw it as something much deeper, something far more human. To him, addiction wasn't a failure of willpower. It was a spiritual crisis, a silent scream from the soul, a cry for something meaningful in a world that feels increasingly hollow. Think about it. Addiction isn't always about alcohol or pills. Sometimes it's the phone you can't put down, the relationship you know is breaking you but you still chase, the scrolling, the binging, the just one more that never actually ends. Jung said, all addictions are substitutes for legitimate suffering. That means addiction isn't about wanting too much, it's about not knowing what to do with a pain that feels too big, too shapeless, too deep to name. What if the addict isn't weak, but honest? What if they're not running from life, but from a life that's lost all sense of soul? You see, we've built a world obsessed with performance and productivity. But underneath it all, so many people are starving, not for food, not for pleasure, but for meaning, for depth, for silence. And when the world doesn't offer that, people look for it in whatever form they can find, even if it destroys them. So maybe it's time to look at addiction not as a flaw, but as a message, not as a curse, but as a signpost. Because what if the addiction was never the enemy? What if it was pointing you back towards something sacred you forgot? Could it be that addiction isn't a failure to resist, but a longing to feel whole again? What if it was pointing you back towards something sacred you forgot? Most people think addicts are chasing pleasure, but the truth, they're not chasing a high, they're chasing a moment of relief. A second of silence in a life that won't stop screaming at them. It's not about thrill, it's about pause, about finally escaping the noise, the guilt, the shame, the invisible pressure to keep pretending everything is fine when it's not. Addiction, at its core, is rarely about wanting more. It's about not knowing how to carry what already hurts. You ever feel that quiet ache? Like there's a weight on your chest you can't explain, a sense of emptiness that doesn't go away, no matter how many goals you hit or smiles you fake? That's where addiction begins. Not in the substance, not in the habit, but in the moment you realize you're drowning in something no one else can see. Carl Jung believed that addiction isn't a desire to escape responsibility. It's a desperate attempt to escape meaninglessness. Because some pain isn't just painful, it's pointless.
It's a king.
It feels like suffering for no reason. And when suffering has no meaning, your mind will do anything to escape it. So you scroll, you drink, you gamble, not because it solves anything, but because, for a fleeting moment, it gives the illusion that you're in control, that you can make the ache stop. And that's what makes addiction so seductive. Not the euphoria, not the chaos, but the temporary quiet. That stolen second of stillness where you don't have to pretend anymore. But here's the paradox. Behind every addiction, there's not a weak-willed person. There's a human being too wounded to keep wearing the mask, too tired to keep performing strength, too alone to tell anyone, I'm not okay. And that is the real war. Not against the drug, not against the screen, but against the unbearable silence we've never been taught how to face.
It's a king.
Addiction doesn't begin with a bottle, it begins the moment we silence the part of ourselves that knows the truth. That quiet, inner voice, the one that says, this isn't who I am, or something's not right, gets buried. And in its place, we build a mask. We become what the world wants to see: polite, strong, put together, unbothered. But underneath that mask is a storm. Carl Jung called it the shadow. The parts of us we've rejected, the grief we never cried, the rage we weren't allowed to express, the shame we were taught to hide. We push those feelings down, pretend they don't exist, but they don't disappear. They wait. And one day, they find a way to speak through behavior we don't understand. Ever felt like a part of you was acting without your permission? Like you were watching yourself self destruct and couldn't stop it? That's not evil. That's the shadow. It's not here to ruin your life, it's here to wake you up. Jung didn't believe addicts were possessed by darkness, he believed they were possessed by unacknowledged pain. Because here's the truth most people won't tell you: the shadow is not a monster. It's the parts of you that still feel, even when the rest of you has gone numb. And until you turn toward that pain, not with fear but with compassion, it will keep surfacing, it will keep sabotaging, it will keep screaming through your addictions. This is why addiction isn't just a habit, it's an unconscious cry for integration, a desperate attempt to reclaim the self we abandoned. You don't heal by destroying the shadow, you heal by listening to it, by facing the parts of you that never got the chance to speak. That brief moment of silence, that temporary escape where the noise finally stops, and for just a second, everything feels okay. You see, the real craving isn't for the substance, it's for what the substance pretends to give you: peace, stillness, meaning. Carl Jung believed addiction wasn't a moral failure, he called it a failed spiritual quest, because the addict isn't chasing chaos, they're chasing connection, not to others, but to something sacred, something that makes life feel real again. Think about it. We live in a world that's forgotten how to feed the soul. Everything is fast, disconnected, hollow. We've replaced ritual with routine, depth with distraction, and wonder with productivity. So people turn to substitutes. They look for God in a bottle, for peace in a screen, for love in a one-night high that never lasts. But it's all smoke and mirrors, a sacred hunger misdiagnosed as a bad habit. And the tragedy is, no one ever told them what they were really searching for, because what if the addiction wasn't about pleasure at all? What if it was a signal, a sign that something essential is missing, that your life has become so disconnected from meaning that even destruction feels more real than numbness? And maybe that's the hardest part to admit, that the thing you keep reaching for isn't what you want, it's just the closest thing you've found to fill the silence. But you were never meant to worship relief. You were meant to remember who you are: a soul, not a symptom, a seeker, not a failure. And the moment you stop chasing the feeling and start listening to the hunger beneath it, that's when everything begins to shift. It's easy to blame addiction on personal failure, but what if the real sickness isn't just individual? What if it's cultural? We live in a world that praises performance and productivity. Get up, hustle, smile, post, repeat, but no one asks how your soul is doing. In this kind of world, silence is suspicious, slowness looks like weakness, and depth? Depth is inconvenient. Carl Jung once said that modern life strips away the symbolic, the rituals, the myths, the sacred spaces that used to give our struggles meaning. And without that meaning, we starve. Not for food, not even for love, but for something real, something alive. And when we can't find it, we start trying to recreate it alone. That's what addiction often is: a solo ritual, a sacred act done in secret, a desperate attempt to feel something spiritual, even if it's through pain. You ever notice that some people light a candle before they drink, or put on music before they scroll or binge or spiral? It's not random, it's instinct. We're trying to ritualize relief. But here's the truth: rituals only heal when they're rooted in truth, and when they're done in community. Addiction grows in isolation. Healing, but connection is rare in a society that rewards the mask. We've normalized surface level everything: conversations, relationships, even healing. And when you're drowning in existential hunger and all the world offers is distraction and dopamine, eventually you'll reach for anything that feels sacred, even if it's killing you. Because a starving soul doesn't care about consequences, it just wants to feel real again. Until we admit that our culture itself is spiritually starved, we'll keep treating symptoms while the root cause goes untouched. Addiction is not just a personal crisis, it's a mirror, reflecting what our society no longer honors: stillness, ceremony, depth, soul, rock bottom. We say it like it's the end, like it's the place you hit when everything has fallen apart and there's nothing left but shame. But what if rock bottom isn't failure? What if it's a beginning? Carl Jung believed that rock bottom isn't where life ends, it's where ego dies. And in that death, something sacred starts to stir. Because when the distractions no longer work, when the excuses don't land, and when no one believes your mask anymore, that's when truth walks in. And truth doesn't knock gently. It rips the curtain back. It shows you everything you tried to outrun. And yes, it hurts. But in that silence, when there's nowhere left to hide, your authentic self begins to awaken. It's raw, it's vulnerable, but it's real. And for many, it's the first time they've felt real in years. Every ancient myth tells this story. The hero must first descend into the cave, into the underworld, into the dark, not to be punished, but to be reborn. Addiction, heartbreak, collapse, these aren't interruptions to life. They're initiations. And the danger isn't falling, the danger is hovering, just above the fall for years, numb, distracted, half alive. Rock bottom strips it all away: the performance, the noise, the armor. And what's left? Just you. Not the version you show the world, the real you, the one that remembers who you were before the world told you who to be. That's why Jung didn't fear rock bottom. He saw it as a sacred threshold, not the end of the road, but the place where your real story finally begins. Because transformation doesn't come when life is perfect. It comes when the old self shatters and something deeper steps forward. We're told that healing is about quitting, cutting the cord, saying no. But real healing goes much deeper than discipline. It's not about how long you can resist the thing. It's about understanding why you needed it in the first place. Carl Jung believed that addiction isn't a sign of weakness. It's a symbolic message from the parts of yourself. And here's the twist most people miss. Those parts of you, they're not trying to destroy you. They're trying to speak to you. The cravings, the compulsions, the sabotage, they're not the enemy. They're the language of your unloved parts, begging to be seen, heard, and held. Jung said the gold is in the shadow, which means the very things you've been taught to run from, your anger, your tears, your failures, might be hiding your greatest gifts, your creativity, your truth, your fire. But only if you're willing to stop fighting yourself and start listening. We live in a world that teaches us to amputate pain, to cut it out, numb it, run from it. But what you repress doesn't disappear. It waits. And when it has no voice, it finds a way to act. Through addiction, through collapse, through behaviors you don't recognize. Integration is the opposite of suppression. It's bringing those parts of you back into the circle, not to shame them, not to fix them, but to understand why they showed up in the first place. Because once you stop trying to become perfect, you finally begin to become whole. And wholeness, not control, is where freedom actually lives. We live in a world obsessed with knowledge. Read more books, take another course, memorize the next 5 steps to healing. But real transformation doesn't happen in the mind. It happens in the soul. Carl Jung understood this deeply. He believed that healing isn't about learning more, it's about awakening to something symbolic. A dream, a vision, a breakdown so honest it strips you bare. because that's the moment everything changes. Not when the pain disappears, but when the pain suddenly makes sense. You see, when suffering gains context, it stops being just suffering. It becomes initiation. And in that moment, something ancient inside of you begins to stir. Something that doesn't speak in logic, but in symbols, in metaphor, in the quiet knowing that this pain means something. Every great myth, every spiritual tradition, every hero's journey, they all point to the same truth. You don't become whole by avoiding the dragon. You become whole by facing it and learning why it was there in the first place. Because the real enemy isn't the substance. It's the self-deception that made you reach for it. It's the inner split that taught you to hide from your truth. Addiction, in this light, becomes a false initiation. It mimics transcendence, but it leaves you more fragmented than before. True healing is different. It doesn't demand that you be perfect. It asks that you be honest, that you see your pain not as punishment, but as a doorway, a sacred passage back to yourself. And here's the beauty in it all. You don't need to fix everything overnight. You just need to listen to your grief, your longing, your confusion, because in that listening, you'll find your symbols, the ones meant only for you, and they'll begin to reorder your world from the inside out. That's the mythic shift. Not becoming someone new, but remembering who you were before the world told you to forget. Addiction doesn't mean you're broken. It means you're disoriented, lost in a world of noise, unable to hear the quiet voice within you, because that voice, it never left. It just got buried beneath the pressure to be okay, to be strong, to be normal, to survive in a world that never made space for your truth. And here's the thing no one talks about. Most addicts aren't trying to destroy themselves. They're trying to find themselves. But they've been searching in all the wrong places. In pills, in perfection, in performance. But healing doesn't begin with a breakthrough. It begins with a whisper. A soft inner knowing that says, "This isn't who I really am." And once that whisper becomes louder than the craving, something starts to shift. Not all at once, not like magic, but like a compass slowly realigning itself back to true north. Carl Jung taught that the path to wholeness isn't a straight line, it's a spiral. You return to the same pain, the same wound, the same pattern. But each time, you meet it with a new level of awareness. That's what healing really looks like. Not constant progress, but deeper presence. Not avoiding the storm, but learning how to stand inside it without losing yourself. And the more you reconnect with your true self, the self that was there before the world taught you to escape it, the less power the addiction holds. Because addiction is loud, but truth is patient. It waits, quietly, until you're ready to return. And when you finally do, when you choose to sit with yourself instead of run, you don't just recover, you remember. Remember that you were never the addiction. You were the one watching it, the one aching beneath it, the one who knew deep down there had to be more. And that knowing, that tiny flame still burning in the dark, that's your way back home. Healing isn't about becoming perfect. It's about becoming real. It's not about chasing some flawless version of yourself. It's about reclaiming the parts you left behind just to survive. Because somewhere along the way, you were taught to exile your grief, your anger, your sensitivity, to tuck it all away and call that strength. But true freedom is not in perfection. It's in presence. It's in finally being able to sit with yourself as you are, unmasked, unperformed, undivided. Carl Jung believed that the real work of healing isn't to fix the addict, it's to bring them home. Back to the parts of themselves that were never broken, only forgotten. And this journey, it's not clinical. You see, the real gift isn't sobriety, it's wholeness. It's waking up one day and realizing you no longer need the high because you found meaning. The kind of meaning that makes even your darkest days feel like part of something greater. The kind of meaning that roots you when everything else feels like it's falling apart. And if you're listening to this right now, you need to know something. You are not broken. You are not beyond hope. You are on a path. And addiction, however painful, is not the end. It's the map. A map that only reveals itself in the dark, but always, always points you back to the light. So, no, this isn't about going back to who you were. It's about becoming who you were always meant to be. And maybe, just maybe, that's the most sacred journey of all.